All right. Welcome everyone to uh another day of GSC. And today's a very special day. We have a guest speaker, and he's gonna be telling us about sound and stuff. Uh,
Among other things, yes.
Among other things. Um, yeah, and yeah, take it away, man.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll start sharing my screen.
Yep.
Uh, let's see. Is this gonna work?
Oh, I might need to give you. Oh, you got it.
I don't know. Can you see me? You
We
see my stuff?
can. We can see your stuff.
I
All right.
see this.
Two
You see
boxes.
the PowerPoint? Cool. I'm just gonna hope it works because I'm gone full screen, so I can't see anything.
I can see two boxes and some lines.
That is not
It was
correct.
two white rectangles.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
What? Oh, so let's go.
Try sharing your whole screen.
It is sharing my whole screen. I think. I just went full screen again. Is it?
I mean, like your actual screen instead of the window, like instead of
Okay.
PowerPoint.
All right. Let me give that a shot. Yeah, that's probably the better idea. Okay.
Awesome.
There we go.
Good.
There you go.
Yep.
There
Okay.
you go.
All right. Take it
All
away.
right. Hello, everybody. My name is Moishe Grosh, and we're going to talk about some sound design tips and tricks that I wish I knew before I had graduated. So let's get some preliminary stuff out of the way. Who am I? I'm a 2020 graduate somehow, who decided to focus their efforts into the sound design discipline. That was a decision I made willingly, and I've composed over a dozen different songs that were used for games within our GDW program, and I've recorded, edited, and mixed and otherwise sourced over 100 different sound effects for games, about 75 of which were for our last game jam back in October. Despite all that, I'm still unemployed, which I'll explain later. So the question is, why am I speaking? Well, unemployment frees up a lot of time compared to industry professionals who, actually have to work for their money. But because I'm a recent graduate, it gives me better insight as to what you guys are going to want to expect if you decide to go into sound design. I'm also the only sound designer in my year who isn't socially anxious, and on top of all that, I like to act superior and knowledgeable. Now, before we begin, I'm just going to get some things out of the way. This is not a lecture, okay? I'm not here to, like, you can take notes. We're recording this, so you can rewatch this at any time. I'm going to also post the PowerPoint if you want me to, but everything I'm going to give here, it's surface level here. I'm going to be generalizing a lot of things. There's going to be more exceptions to than rules than what I'm end up stating here. And everything here, this is a jumping off point, not gospel. This is to help you understand what exactly it is you're getting into by choosing to be a sound designer. And so further research is going to be required. Okay, don't expect this to be the be all end all of sound design information, tips, tricks, and all that stuff. So let's get into some fun stuff, some myths and facts. This one's for mostly the newer guys, the first years. The myth of sound design is easy. My nephew can make tunes in GarageBand. I don't think I need to explain why that's a myth for most of you. But in case, you pay for the knowledge, not the product. And a fact, sound design is way more complicated than most people think. Composing music is an art, of course, but making good sound effects, at this point, once you get the formula down, it's practically a science. I say practically because, unfortunately, it still requires good hearing, which is not really something you can teach. If you can try your hardest, but it's not perfect for teaching. It's mostly down to just who you are biologically. Like, you could just be born with terrible hearing. That's unfortunate. Another myth. Sound design is just making music. What you're going to see oftentimes is amateurs or uninformed people will assume that sound design only comes with music, and it's compounded by the fact that in most work in progress channels, you're only going to see music work in progresses. And you're not going to see a lot of sound effects, but the truth is that you're going to often work with sound effects more than music. The smaller studios are going to ask you, if you get work at smaller studios, they're going to ask you for equal parts music. They're going to ask you for equal parts sound effects. So you're going to need to work with a lot of them as well. If you get hired at the bigger studios, they're often going to have dedicated composers and hire people who went to school for music and not game development, like us. So unfortunately, that's the reality. Here's some sad facts, but unfortunately, they're true. You're going to be working with very few people as a sound designer. The sound teams are never nearly as large as programming teams or animation teams or modeling teams or art teams or any other teams. The smaller studios, like if you're working in smaller indie studios, you're on your own. Which some of you may think, oh, that's fine. I can just listen to music while I make music. No, you can't do that. So it's going to be a bit hell, especially as you work on sound effects because you can't really listen to music. Now, we were talking about uh, having that fan white noise in the background, and I mean, some of you may be able to work with that. I don't think I could. But for the reality is that you're going to be listening to metal sounds like for me, I was listening to metal grating against concrete for like 2 hours on repeat, just trying to make sure that each and every setting was correct. So it sounded just the way I wanted it to. And I'm not insane, I swear. The fact is, you're most likely not going to be working in house, though. So many smalls or studios, they're going to hire freelance sound designers because they just can't afford the recording space. They can't afford recording studios. They can't afford giant Foley studios. They work in an office building. They work at some guy's house. So they put all that on you and just give you the money, and it's up to you to do it. Or they hire dedicated sound companies. Now, here's the fun part. I would list to you what some of those sound companies are so you guys can start looking. But here's the thing. I don't know. Okay, I've asked certain companies, I've talked around with companies, and some of them said, "Oh yeah, we hire dedicated sound companies." I'm like, "Oh great, which ones?" That way I can check them out. They're like, "Oh, we will send you a list," and then they ghost me. So I couldn't share that information if I want to because I don't have it. It's surprisingly, sound designers are really helpful people. Game dev companies to sound designers, not so much. Now, let's meet Francis Bru. I pronounced that name probably incorrectly because it's French and my French accent is absolutely terrible. He's the audio director at Red Barrels Games. Uh, if you don't know Red Barrels, they are the ones who made Outlast. On top of that, he is also their entire sound department, which means he makes the music, he makes the sound effects, and he makes just about everything that makes you crap your pants when you play those games. He's statistically the most likely output come for in-house employment as a sound designer from this school, which isn't bad. I mean, he's a great guy. I talked to him at MIGS a couple years back when we could still actually go in person. He was a great guy, fun to hang around with, very nice person. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you have Rom DePrisco. He's a freelance sound designer, and he did sound effects and music for Guacamole. Yeah, all three of them. He also teaches advanced sound design here, but which is a program that runs only every 2 years. So I'm asking every one person here to write to the school and beg him to bring him back every year because he is fantastic as a teacher. He's tough, he's fair, and he genuinely wants you to succeed in music. Okay, so do that. He's your other option for sound design, going freelance. Now, let's get some terminology out of the way. This one's mostly for the new guys who don't really know this, or the people who just didn't know it was called this. I can refer to it this way without anybody going like, "Huh? What is this? What are you talking about?" So a DAW is short for digital audio workstation. That's your Audacity, your GarageBand, your FL Studio. This is basically if you can load a sound file into it, that's a DAW. Then there's the middleware, which is how sound gets put into game. 99.99 repeating percent of the time, you're talking about Fmod or Wise or WWise. I don't know how it's pronounced. Nobody knows how it's pronounced. Then there's the EQ, which means equalizer. This allows you to boost or cut certain frequencies along your musical track, which allows you for precise audio mixing. You can emphasize certain parts, remove other parts. It's actually a fantastic tool, even while it seems pretty simplistic or even complicated, depending on how you want to look at it at the same time. It is one of the best tools you're going to work with. Then you have your audio interface. Among other things, it's used to power various audio devices. And it's that nice little box that sits on a lot of sound designers' tables that their microphones are plugged into or their headphones are plugged into, like mine is right now. A monitor doesn't refer to the computer screen. In this case, they are often called either a studio reference monitor, a reference monitor, a studio monitor, or whatever. Or sometimes they're just called monitors because sound design terminology is confusing. These are what they do, what differentiates them between a regular speaker is that they pass the audio files, the audio signal, and play it as is. So when you're buying speaker or something for your computer, sometimes you'll see on the box built-in bass boost or built-in treble boost or something like that. You don't want one of those when mixing music because it's built in there and you have to adjust accordingly. You can still mix in them. It's just not the best. These ones just take the signal, you tell it to play a G note, it will play a G, not bass boosted G, nothing like that. And so they're used for sound editing and mixing. Then you have your tweeter, which are like monitors, but they're designed for the higher frequencies. And more often than not, when you buy a studio monitor, they're built into it. They can also be sold separately. So if you have that, if you want to get that like 4 like surround sound type thing, you're going to want that. You can get that if you want. Now, for the job hierarchy, if you're like me, you've seen several different job positions that people had at different companies when you're trying to talk to people. One person says audio lead, one person says audio director, senior sound designer, junior sound designer. You're not really sure what it means. And so in order, I actually asked about this. And in order, generally speaking, it goes the audio director is your head honcho, he's your top dog, big cheese. Then you goes your audio lead, then your senior sound designer, and then it's either called your junior sound designer or just your sound designer in terms of main hierarchy. Now, that's not to say that's the only sound-based jobs. There's your audio QA, which is exactly as what you'd think an audio QA does. Make sure that all the sounds sound right, which in theory would sound fun, but it's also in theory sounds fun to be an actual QA tester for games. It's not. And then there's your composer who makes exclusively the music, which if you're lucky, you get that job. Because it's so much more fun to make music because at the very least you listen to a harmony as opposed to, like I said, metal scraping against concrete for 6 hours. Trying to make sure that that the high pitched scraping of it is just right. Then there's your audio programmer or your technical sound designer. It's the same name, does the same thing. Those guys are the ones that mostly work with your middleware, your Fmod, your WYs. They do the programming parts. They're the ones that put the sound into the game. They do have to have a bit of sound knowledge on their own, but it's not their whole job. So, what do sound designers need? All right, this is all the stuff that you're going to want to have, or at least plan to get at some point in your life if you're going to be a sound designer. For software, you got your DAW. So you got Reaper, Pro Tools, SoundForge, FL Studio, Cubase, and LMMS. The things I've underlined, those ones are, as far as from all the job postings I've seen, those are your go-to. One of those three, if you have knowledge in them, will set you. Will make you set. You'll be able to apply for that. Having knowledge in that is basically makes it so much easier for you. I've highlighted Reaper and SoundForge in green because those ones are your cheapest options. Those ones are like SoundForge is quite inexpensive. Reaper is even less so. Pro Tools is stupidly expensive. I don't recommend even getting it. Like even though it is industry standard, it's not worth the hassle because oftentimes companies will say Pro Tools or equivalent. So you don't even need to worry about that. LMMS is in yellow because it's free. So if you can't afford anything right now, grab that. It's free to play. It's free to use. Learn it, and it starts you off somewhere. There's also Audacity, but I actually haven't seen many people post that in job offers. Well, either. So that's also there. FL Studio and Cubase, same thing. Haven't really seen many job postings specifically asking for those, but they're always good to have because they're fun. They're nice tools. As for the software, the middleware, there's really just Fmod and Wise. I'm sure there's probably other ones, but if you've pulled up any game recently, you've seen that they still have like the Fmod with the WYs or Wise logo. And so even the big AAA studios use these. Learn one of them and you're set. Learn both of them if you can. Learn one of them, you should be fine. As for the hardware, this is the fun part. You're going to want to look for your headphones. You're going to want balanced or flat audio. It gives you a better idea for sound levels. However, I cannot stress this enough. Don't mix in headphones. All right. Avoid it every step of the way. It gives you a different opinion because the audio is so close to your ears. You can hear things a lot clearly, and then when it gets played back through speakers, studio monitors, hell, even your phone, it's going to sound so much different and oftentimes worse. When you're buying, though, that doesn't mean you can't use them. When you're buying them, they have different resistance levels. They're labeled ohms, obviously, because that's the resistance unit. But higher resistance on them means that you're going to get a better quality sound input. Because on the downside, though, that means it requires more power to push that sound through, which is where the audio interface comes in. However, if if you're worried about, spending hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for stuff like that, then you picked the wrong hobby, or not hobby, the wrong profession. Sound design is quite expensive. But certain motherboards can power some resistances. So you might want to check your model on that for your computer, figure out whether or not you're good for that. Like mine, for example, is a B450, and it can power up to 600 ohms of headphones. I personally have this one right here, the Beyerdynamics DT77 Pro 250 ohms version, because I figured go big or go home. Now, as for the backings, there are some closed and there are open audio. There are open back headphones, which determines exactly what it sounds. The open ones allow you to hear the world around you, which means that you can talk to multiple people without shouting or sounding stupid, like I probably do now because I'm using closed back headphones. The closed ones allow you to just hear the sounds, allows you to mix in public while traveling, and also gives you the benefit of allowing you to ignore your problems. It's that much easier with significant more efficiency than headphones or than other headphones or earbuds. As for hardware, the audio interface. This case, price does not equal quality here. Okay, so you're going to see audio interfaces that are like $1,500. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the best there is. Like the Audient ID4, that thing is like several $100s. It doesn't mean it's the best. Some trusted brands, these are the ones that I know of: Behringer and Audient. The Audient ones are those expensive, and the price oftentimes depends on however many features it has. I've seen audio interfaces with like 40 input channels, like, which I don't know what you're going to need them for. I personally use the Behringer Euphoria UMC 202 HD. It's got 2 input channels, one of which is powering the mic that I'm talking to you with. And as just a flat out, it's a good idea to get one with at least one audio input, because if you're going to be recording with a guitar, if you want to like record your guitar, or if you just want to record a mic, then you're going to need that. Audient ID4 doesn't actually have one of those. It's purely for sound mixing. Now, for the monitors. These are the most expensive part of the setup. This time you often get what you pay for. And you're looking at around $300 per monitor on the low end. So it's very, very expensive. You're going to want to test your studio monitors before you buy them. Okay, prepare the reference material. When I went to buy mine, which are these two right here, I did not have reference material, at least not able to plug in reference material. And so what the guys at Long McQuaid ended up doing was they just played a song through it, which, if you know what you're listening for, is fine as reference material, but really isn't the best. What you're going to want to do is create a simple track in your DAW that uses high notes, low notes, pans left to right, and basically just maybe include a phaser or something just to get an idea of how big of a range it's got. And you want to stand as close to in between the two of them as you can for the surround speaker. Some good brands. These ones were recommended to me by an industry professional. Atom Audio, like I said, I've got these two right in the middle there. You're going to want Yamaha, of course, because Yamaha is always good for music stuff. Genelec, I've never actually heard of, but apparently they've got some pretty flat sounding stuff. And then Mackie stuff is also pretty good. Of course, there's more brands, so do your research, figure out which ones are right for you. As for microphones, these ones are not, obviously, microphones are not just for streaming, and there's 4 major types that you use for recording. There's your dynamic microphone, which is a standard microphone used by streamers, the kind used in school assemblies, picks up audio in all directions. These guys right here, the ones that you see people do mic drops with. There's your condenser mic, which only picks up the audio from one direction. which is also used by streamers, and they're the more expensive microphones that compared to the dynamic ones. Like I've got right here is the Audio Technica AT 2020, which is very good mic. That's what I'm speaking to you with right now. Then there's your lavalier mic, which clips on. It's a clip-on microphone used in films, TV, whatnot. Basically, if you want to capture a person who's moving, and keep it small. Then there's your shotgun or your directional mic. Looks like a stick because it is a stick. It records whatever it's pointing at, only whatever it's pointing at. Keeps everything out from the sides, and those are the boom microphones. So if you ever seen those guys with the big long boom arms and the big hairy like pop filter, that's what's underneath it. There's also a ribbon microphone, which is this guy right here. But those things are way too expensive and way too fragile for me to even bother mentioning because I do not recommend you spending any time getting them because, like I said, they're so expensive, so fragile. Because the sound is recorded based on a vibrating ribbon inside, which can be easily destroyed or easily offset, which completely ruins the entire thing. Now, for the best quality microphones, you're going to want to include the words XLR in the search parameters. So XLR is the type of output they have, which gets you the best audio signal. These, of course, require an audio interface. You can get an XLR to USB cable, but at that point, you might as well just get the USB variant of the microphone because it's the same audio signal. You're just wasting. It's like you're compressing the audio essentially. It's not worth doing that, frankly. And also, here's some general advice, which I'm sure is probably what Carter and everyone else was expecting when they asked me to come talk. So this is what I wish I knew before I graduated. Demo reels for the music. You're gonna want basically, well, it's not really a demo reel. It's a mixtape. You're making a mixtape, guys. So you're gonna make 10 sounds, 10 songs, and take the best 30 seconds or so, maybe 10 seconds of each of them. And you're going to slap that into a zip folder. And you're going to want to vary the genre of music so that way you can show off your diversity. And yes, I know you like whatever, like lo-fi hip hop. I know you like the Eurobeat stuff. You got to vary it. Just keep them with the basic stuff. Okay. Rock, synthwave. You don't need to go you don't need to do Lovecraftian rock here. You know, none. You don't need to do those subgenres which are so completely ridiculous. You just keep it basic, and you should be good to go. For sound effects, you're gonna want to do a sound replacement. So take gameplay footage, either from a gameplay trailer, or cinematic trailer, or really just any sort of trailer for games. If you're doing a game demo reel, you're gonna want to mute the sound and replace it with your own. Now, what I mean by that is you don't have to take a scene, mute it, and then replace every single sound that's in that scene. If you want, you can only replace the sounds that you want to emphasize, but you need to label it as emphasis. So if you're emphasizing the melee combat in, say, Warframe by taking a scene from taking some gameplay footage and muting the audio, you need to put in your demo reel that's what you did. Otherwise, people will be like, okay, well, this is unfinished, is what they're going to think. So just make sure you label everything intentionally so that they know what to listen for. Now, this is called. Okay, well, that was annoying. This is the wrong kind of demo reel, but it uses original sound effects. It showcases my sound mixing skills. It's still viable for demo reels. This is something I did. It took me about 3 months to make. I found out later that this is kind of more of a trailer edit than a demo reel. This isn't really what companies look for. I have realized I actually hadn't posted it in the workshop channel, so I'm going to do that after this speech so you guys can give it a watch. I'm not going to play it now just for timing's sake. Most companies in their job postings, they might not necessarily say in the demo reel that they don't want music. There are plenty that do, but in general, you're not going to want to put music in your demo reel because it's going to drown out the sound effects and you're kind of there to show off the sound effects. So that's what I did wrong with this, besides the fact of it basically just being a trailer edit. And what to include in the demo reel. Oh, God, why is it doing this? you're gonna want to tailor the demo reel to the company. You're gonna try to make one using the games that the company has made. So if you're applying for Ubisoft, use Watch Dogs, Splinter Cell, The Crew, like I did. You're gonna just keep it varied on that. But you're also gonna want to make a general demo reel too. So so various games, whichever ones you want to do, keep it general and that should be the first one you make, because you don't know who you're going to be able to apply for. You don't know which positions are going to be open. If you have the time to make ones for all of your favorite companies that you want to work for, I suppose go for it, but make sure your general one is the best it can be, because that's going to be the one that you're probably going to end up submitting the most. And as for what to include in it, you're going to want a bit of everything depending on the company size. So Foley sound effects you made completely on your own. You're going to want a major sound effects piece. So I said you don't have to replace every single sound effect in a scene. A major sound effects piece is doing just that, replacing every single sound effect in the scene and making it as big as you can. Voice work, some of you may be a little bit iffy about because you hate the sound of your own voice once it's played back to you, or you just think you can't emote worth a damn. That's okay. You don't have to do actual voice lines to do voice work. You can use your voice to record demon noises. Like if you're using a Doom Eternal trailer, you can do that using your voice. It still counts. You don't need to like hype yourself up or freak yourself out that, oh no, I can't act at all. This is going to sound terrible. You're in the clear. You don't have to do voice lines. And then if you've got middleware working, so if you're practicing with Fmod or Wise or anything like that, if you want to include one of your systems, a system you've developed in there, so like for various interaction sound effects for when you're talking to a player or something like that, to randomize it and then make it adaptive audio, which I think you guys did a lecture on, or not a lecture, but like you did a meeting on the other day on adaptive audio, something like that. If you want to include that in your demo reel, that can only help. It can't harm your work unless it sucks, in which case it could probably harm it. But just don't make it suck. Now, how do you make good sound effects? That's a trick question. There's no specific method to make realistic sounds because everything sounds like something else. Though, when in doubt or when possible, just use the actual thing. Like, I don't know if he's still running it, but for the second years, um, Bill used to run the Intro to Game Sound class, and a lot of the assignments that he had you do was to do something basically with cars, but you couldn't use glass breaking or any sounds like that. You don't have to do that anymore. And when you're an actual sound designer, you don't have to avoid using the real thing. You can just use the real thing. You're allowed. You have that freedom. And don't be afraid to use the royalty-free sounds. So freesound.org, sapsplat.com, soundbible.com, you're allowed to use them. Okay. Even as a professional sound designer, you're not going to be expected to record 100% original sound effects for every single project. It's like no one's going to make you be that anal about unique sound effects. So build up your library, grab a separate terabyte SSD for your computer if you want, and put only your sound library in there, because these are going to get big. These are going to grow very fast. Because especially if you get the .wav files, those are uncompressed and it's the best quality sound files there is. Now, how to find inspiration for music? That one has a little bit more of an open-ended answer. For example, what you can do what I did. If you've been working in a DAW before, you can use a tool or you can use an instrument that you've never used before. And make an entire song around that. I worked with, if you've used Fmod Studio, there's this sound effect tool called Gross Beats, which is something I'd never used before. And then I forced myself to make an entire song around it. And actually, it's one of my more favorite songs. I mean, it's not as good as some of the stuff that Carter's put out, but I'm actually really proud of it. I'll post it in there.
I wouldn't go far as to say that.
Well, no, I really like your stuff, Carter.
Thank you.
But I'll post it in the workshop channel as well as my actual demo reel or trailer edit if you want to take a look at it. Another method is you could just pick a genre out of the hat and force yourself to do it. Make a genre in that one. Test yourself, push your limits, figure out what you can and cannot do, and do it anyways, even if you can't do it. Another one, give yourself a time time constrained. If you've got a day to make music, if you got 4 hours to make music, you're not going to be able to second guess yourself. You won't have the time to second guess yourself. You won't have the time to think it has to be perfect. You're gonna have is just the time to make the song. Sure, you can go back in later and touch it up if you want, but you set a time constraint and you will. It's surprisingly, creativity comes from constriction or from. So you'd be surprised what you can do with so little time. Well, actually, I say that, but I mean, for students here, I'm sure most of you have done a lot of projects at the last minute. So you know exactly what can come out of very little time. Importantly, though, try anything. All right, when you're making music, if you don't need to, you're not expected to be Mozart. You're not expected to be Beethoven. You're not even expected to be Fallout Boy. Okay, just make a basic chord progression if you want, like something like that, or just like random notes, but put it on your DAW, put it in your project file. Start a page full of scribbles is better than an empty page, as I've written here. It's the same. As long as you start, you will figure it out. Hell, if you want, just make Megalovania, put it on there. Just fill up your DAW with something and work and go back and change it later. But if you stare at an empty project for so long, you're gonna get scared. And it happens. It happens to everyone. And it's fine. But you just need to figure out a way to start. And then finally, you could just base it off of the emotion you want to convey. So if you're trying to, make a happy piece, make it like you can just pick an emotion, make it happy. Depression, I found, is a very good source of inspiration, which is fantastic because as a sound designer in a game development world, you're gonna have a lot of it. Not finding a job does tend to do that to you. So that's always a nice positive, I suppose. Now, how much are you worth? Well, according to the black market, your kidney's worth are about $400 to $500. But in terms of selling your soul and your work, there's multiple different methods in terms of this case. So you can do it in different ways. The way I've been taught to do it, and this one was told to me by Ram DePrisco, and this is how he does it, and so this is kind of how I'm going to do it: is you charge a price per minute of song. So a flat rate for every minute of song someone wants to do to make, and then you take 10% of that amount and you set it as the sound effects, regardless of length, up to a point. So other people, they go into more in depth and specific pricing schemes depending on the type of sound or song length. So it's like gunshots or this amount or something like that. But most importantly, in your contract that you sign as a freelancer, you're going to allow for revisions. So, you come back with a sound effect and the client's like, no, this is crap. Change this or add this or whatever. What happens a lot is, you set revision limits. So they can say, you can set it so like you can get 3 changes before you have to either renegotiate the contract or start a whole new contract, which doesn't sound, which a lot of studios, the bigger studios with all the money in the world, they'll afford to do it. So they'll just keep giving you revisions until they're happy. You can decide what counts as a revision. There's no like set limit there. But obviously it depends on how well you like the company that you're working for. As for voice acting prices, that one's based solely on the voice actor. There's no little key trick to it, and because it's you're basically paying for another person's services as a person being whose services you're being paid for. Pricing as a freelance agent is very much negotiable. A good tip that I found, if you're going with my method of the price per minute, is to take all of your expenses, all of your monthly expenses, figure out how much you need per month, round it up to the nearest hundred, round it up to the nearest hundred, and set that as the lowest you will negotiate towards. So that way you're covered for whatever you need, and you'll still get an extra bit of change on top of that as profit. But that's not the first price you go to the table with. What I do is I've set it myself at $300 per minute of song. and $30 per sound effect, regard up to like a minute of sound effects, like up to a minute per sound effect. But when I go to the table of negotiations, I tell them $550 because worst case scenario, I still make $300 per minute, which takes me about an hour to make a song. So it's not like I'm underselling myself here. At least in turn, I'm not like I'm working for slave wages. It's still more than minimum. And best case scenario, they just say, okay, yep, $500, $50 per sound effect. Yeah, we can work with that. That's great. Call it a day. Which may imply that they're used to more expensive stuff, but either way, that's still a decent chunk of change for me. So I'm not too upset about it. Now, here's the sound design paradox. It's similar to the employment paradox of you need money, you need a job to get experience, but you need experience to get a job. Like I said earlier, sound designers are willing to help when they're asked the right questions. And when you ask them the right questions, you get the right amount of knowledge you need. However, you need the right amount of knowledge to know which questions are the right questions. So it gets that really fun little loopy circle there. It could also apply to other professions. I don't know. I'm a sound designer, not a philosopher. Um, so in the interest of helping you guys out, so you don't screw up this, so you come out of this a lot better than I did. Um, what are some of the right questions? Well, these are the ones that I've learned to basically open every conversation I've had with. Whenever I'm talking to someone who actually works at a company, I just go, "What sort of software does the company name use?" Like I said, oftentimes you'll get responses of Fmod or Wise, and sometimes you'll get the other software mentioned. But it's a good conversation starter. It's a good way to get in without being like, "Oh, how do I get a job at this company?" It's like they don't want you to ask that. Like I can tell you right now, that is a wrong question. Don't ask like, "How do I get a job here?" or "Are you guys hiring?" You got to ask them about their job, and they are a lot more receptive. The next question is, what does company name look for in a demo reel? And what I mean by that is I specify if they want realistic sounds, like so if they want a gunshot to sound like a gunshot, or if they want it to sound, if they want like a handgun shot when it fires to be more impactful on the viewer's emotions rather than it just being another gunshot. So it depends entirely on what the game is. If you're applying to like one of the bigger studios, they're going to be boring and just tell you just it's the realistic sounds, um, which is fine, I guess. I mean, sure. Uh, as for the demo reel, you can ask them how many genres they wanted to span. Similar things with a lot of the bigger studios, they've got mostly just super realistic sound games, so they've got separate companies that do the more fun stuff. So you're gonna want to clarify basically, so that way you know what you're working with, know what to work with, so that way you don't come off looking stupid. And like I said earlier, good tips to use the games from that company when you're making your demo reel. And then the final one I asked, and this one's mostly just well, not the final one. This is the second last one I ask. And it's usually about, I ask them if you could tell me a bit about the work environment at their company. This one's mostly to get the sound designer or the person in question to open up, to get them talking more about themselves, how they enjoy it. If you're talking in person, and it can also give you an idea of what it actually is like, because all of them will say, "Oh, it's great," because oftentimes they're either at their company and they don't want to seem like they're trash talking the company they're working for, or they're at a major event, in which case, the law requires they answer yes, they like it here. But you can tell, but if by their like the way they dance around the question or how they answer it, whether or not it's something you actually want to look for. Because even though I kept saying it's like, oh, you're not going to get a lot of jobs, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. Getting jobs is hard, and sound designer, you don't need to do the whole beggars can't be choosers in this case. Okay, you don't have to take any single job that will offer themselves to you. Okay, you're allowed to be picky, and you have that right. Of course, that means that still have to deal with the consequences of being picky, and that is you are not employed. So, tips from the pros. These are the stuff that I asked them. My last question, which was always, is there anything you wish you knew when you were just starting out that you know now? And so I got, from all the people I asked, and these are the responses I got from Compulsion Games, the guys who made We Happy Few, I believe it was the audio director, he told me good sound design is not noticed, bad sound design is, which sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but it's something you don't really think about until you're already getting raked through the coals on it. Produce many ideas, but don't get attached to them. So have hundreds of projects open, have 100 different sound effects. When you're working in a smaller team, you can't force the game to work to your sound effect, even if you really, really like that sound effect or song. You can't force the game around it because, and I didn't mention this earlier, and I should have. Sound design in the larger studios is actually at the end of the game development pipeline. So the game is usually already done by the time you get to work on it in the bigger studios. So, and if anything goes wrong, if they decide to change anything last minute up there, it's going to screw you up, and there's nothing really you can do about it. You just have to be prepped for it. But you can have multiple ideas. You can produce every conceivable idea for music or sound effects that you can, and just keep them on hand. You never know when you're going to use them. Like you may be digging through your stuff 3-5 years later, and you'll be like, "Oh, I forgot this existed," and you pull it up, and you're like, "Why haven't I used this earlier?" And then you throw it into one of your games, or it just happens to be the exact thing you're missing in this one game you've been working on for years or whatever. So, yeah, just don't get attached to your ideas. Be ready to scrap them at the moment's notice. Okay, these are, well, a lot of times people are like, "Oh, this is my masterpiece," but it's not your baby. You can get rid of it. You're allowed. As for what Ram DePrisco said, he said, and this is a direct quote, "Don't be scared to go work on something outside of your comfort zone. Always try anything, even if you can't do it. Learn on the go. Don't turn down any opportunity," which goes almost in direct contrast to what I said, that you're allowed to be picky. But what I think he means by that is, the places, if you apply to, let's say, at PlayStation and for a sound design role, and they're like, "Oh, we think you'd actually be good for, audio QA or technical sound design or audio programming," and they try to hire you with that, and you're personally think, "Oh, I'm not a good audio programmer or any of that," still take the job. Not just because it's like, oh, it's something in industry, but just because if they think you're a good enough hire for that role, anyways, yeah, at this point you've made it. Like they either like who you are as a person, or they are idiots, in which case it's their loss. So then just learn on the go, because most of these skills are very much teachable. They're not like something you have to be born with. This isn't like a talent here. This is all pure skill. You can work on that. He also said invest in good monitors, headphones right away. Yep. That pretty much speaks for itself. You can be a master at the piano, but if your keyboard's out of tune, if your piano's out of tune, you're gonna suck. Doesn't matter how good your technique is with music or with sound editing. If your headphones are bad, if your monitors are bad, that it's gonna sound bad. And then, like I said earlier, EQ is the best audio tool. Practice it, learn it, become intimate with it, buy it dinner. It's going to be it's one of the best things you can work with just because of how versatile it is. You're going to want to slap it on basically every single thing you do just because of how you can make it emphasize what you want, how you can get rid of what wasn't there without you completely chopping up the audio or even distorting it to the point where it doesn't even sound recognizable. Now, as for EA Motive, what they told me was don't be afraid to experiment and find people who encourage your efforts and are willing to share. That last one, if you are listening to this my entire rant that is disguised as a lecture, you're already done that correctly because you're in the Game Sound Club channel, which is what this whole place is designed for. So good on you for that. Round of applause. Don't actually applaud yourself right now because I'm still talking.
Woot woot.
Yeah. And actually, that's about it. So, any questions?
Yeah, I'll go if nobody else will. All right, so first of all, thank you for the very real presentation. I think we miss a lot of that. I think we all kind of take for granted the things that we want to do as game developers or people in this program. But what's the light at the end of the tunnel for you? What's your end goal? as
For
a
you
sound
personally.
designer? Yeah, for you personally.
For me personally, it is actually. Oh shit! I've never actually thought about that. No, end goal for me is, though I say like, well, freelance is the most realistic outcome. Actually, no, yeah, no. My end of the tunnel is freelance. Is top one of the big guys freelance like Mick Gordon, like Ron DeFrisco. It's being able to be my own boss, work on my own stuff. And basically I get to dictate the terms of what sound of who I work with. That is my end goal, is to be a very well-known freelancer.
Right. And I think that's something that's really interesting about the sound section of game development, because there's not really anything else in our field that's like that, where you kind of have, this complete freedom, and you can mess it up with that like complete freedom, but you can also make it really beautiful.
Exactly. Well, that's what should have said earlier, is that the freelancing as a sound designer is not like freelancing as like a photographer or anything like that, where you need to build a client base before you can really get started. Freelancing sound design is almost the norm. And that's which is the most interesting bit of it that I've noticed, that I've found out from talking to people and learning things, is that there are more freelance sound designers than you'd think there are. Of course, you don't really hear about them, but like I said, the big names, Mick Gordon, who did Doom soundtrack, he doesn't specifically work for id. He doesn't or PT Adam Schick, I think I pronounce his name wrong. The guy who did the soundtrack for Cyberpunk. I think he's that guy. I think he works in house, but it's surprising how many well-known sound designers or composers for games are actually freelance. They always assume, because they only ever seem to, they just are on really long contracts.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for the answer. It's a good answer.
No problem. Anyone
How
else?
viable is it to like balance like freelance sound design and like a part-time job? Because my plan, like out of like graduation, was probably just to pick up like a part-time job and try and like balance freelance.
Balancing freelance and a part-time job. Well, it entirely depends on first off, how many contracts as a freelancer you'd get, coupled with how many hours you'd get in your part-time job. Because I work a part-time job at a Petro, and I get basically like 30 hours a day, 30 hours a week, I mean. And so that doesn't really leave me a lot of time to work on sound, at least on my days off exclusively, because I've got other stuff that I need to deal with. But one of the nice things though about freelancing is that, of course, you do good enough job and it does snowball. You get more clients. The second you get your first client, you can add depending on your contract, you can add their stuff onto your resume, and you can already put on that I've gotten clients and whatnot, so more people are willing to trust you, and it builds and builds and builds, and eventually you won't even need to work a part-time job if it gets to that point. But when you're just starting out, it is going to be difficult managing both of them. Either sleepless nights, unfortunately, is going to be a thing, depending on how crazy dedicated you want to be.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else?
If no one else is gonna ask, I was just kind of curious. Do you use multiple DAWs when you're working on stuff? And if so, what have you found to kind of be the best workflow for that? Because
I actually do.
Okay.
I do actually use multiple DAWs. I almost exclusively use FL Studio when I'm making music, just because that's what I've learned for making music. I do also use FL Studio when I'm just applying EQs onto sound effects, just because it's got a more visual EQ than any of the other ones I have. I also use SoundForge for sound effects mostly for editing it, just because the tools it has allows me to work on multiple projects without having to save it, reopen it, or make a new project file, and all that stuff. If I want to edit multiple sound effects at once, I can literally just pop up SoundForge and then slap in one sound effect, one sound clip, edit it, and then it's done. Save it, export, save it as a sound file, send it off, and then in the same project, air quotes, folder, I can just put in a new one and it doesn't change anything because you're saving it as is.
Mm-hmm.
But if sometimes I need to do multi-track stuff, and the version of SoundForge I have doesn't let me export one sound effect with multiple sounds on it, so that I actually have to use Audacity for, which is still a great tool in itself. It's actually getting better as they go on. The open source stuff isn't by default terrible. I mean, look at Blender.
Mm-hmm.
So I do actually use that. As for the workflow between them, it's really it's really just as needed basis. So FL Studio, I've got a fast enough computer so I can actually swap between the different programs very quickly without much delay. So I can actually have the multiple windows open up at once. So I can literally put a thing into FL Studio, EQ it, export it, then immediately put it into SoundForge, do whatever edits I want, then export it out and do all that. So I don't really have a definite workflow. Like there's no order. It's not a pipeline for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an as needed basis.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry if it doesn't really answer your question, but
Oh no, that was good. Yeah, one other thing I was curious about. Wasn't sure if anyone else was gonna ask anything, because I don't wanna step on toes. What are your thoughts on kind of making sound packs? Because one of the things I've been looking at, mainly just as I kind of ease into and transition into the industry, I want to make sound libraries and just put them up for sale. So what are your
Here's
kind
the
of
thing,
thoughts on that thing?
I didn't actually talk about them, but I did actually do research on sound packs and whatnot. And unfortunately, sound packs are even harder to make money from than freelancing is, because at this point, unfortunately, at this point in the game, there are hundreds upon thousands of sound packs out there.
Right.
By either free or paid for. And making money using sound packs as is, like right now, just because of the vast quantities of them, is difficult enough. But then there's also so many quality free ones that are out there that that just even adds to the difficulty. So you can, if you feel like you still want to do that, go for it, but don't be surprised if you end up just making those sound packs for you.
Okay.
All right, don't expect them to be your primary source of income or anything like that. It's unfortunately not gonna happen. I mean, you might get lucky, of course. Never say never.
Yeah.
I really shouldn't really discourage you guys like that, but yeah, no, it could happen. Statistically speaking, I wouldn't. Don't put all your money on it.
All right. Any other questions from anyone?
I'm happy to trash your dreams some more.
I don't have chat open. Is there any?
Oh, doesn't look like it.
All right. Yeah. Think that's it then.
All right. Thank you very much, Carter, for having me.
Yeah, thank you again so much for coming. I really, really do appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know about everyone else, but that was super informative. Yeah, I really, really appreciate that. That was awesome.
All right. Like I said earlier, I'm posting my the trailer that I showed that wasn't really a demo reel. I've just posted that in the workshop channel right now. So if you guys want to give it a watch, you can see exactly what not to do.
All right, awesome.
And then I'm also going to throw in the music file that I said, oh yeah, I just used the Gross Beats one and made an entire song for that.
All right,
so
cool.
Find it.
Well, thanks everybody for coming to the session. It was a pretty special one. Next week we are gonna go over some. Oh, Carter is stealing.
There it is.
Yeah, next week over implementing adaptive audio in Fmod Studio. which I know we kind of talked a little bit about last semester, more so the theory, but definitely come to that. The following Friday, if you are in first year, listen up to this one, especially. We are kind of doing a collab session with GPC. I will be leading it. It's Friday at 5, and basically, if you want to have, Fmod in your first year game, I've made a little library, and we're gonna go through on how to integrate it into the framework. Um, Either that, or by then I'll actually have had collaborated with Nick to get that integrated for you guys. Um, Either way, it's going to be cool. We're going to take what we make on Tuesday and we're going to stick it into our games on Friday. So definitely come out to that. And we're doing core and studio. So if you are, in your own time working on your game, and you want to use studio and you're in first year, this is perfect for you. Second years, you can use this too as an alternative to Rob's framework. And yeah, it's going to be lots of fun. So please do show up.
Yeah, go to GPC and
Yeah.
and then come to GSC after or
Yeah.
before.
Well, no, you go to GSC and then you come to GPC
Right.
because our sessions come before. But anyways,
do.
yeah, thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah. Yeah, and this will be on YouTube in case you missed anything. Just like all the sessions, they'll be on YouTube. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you once again to our amazing guest.
Yeah, thank you very much.